Members, we're going to have order on the floor of the House and in the galleries, or else we'll have the sergeant clear the galleries.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to make a request of the chair. If there's any further outbursts from the galleries, they be cleared.
Well, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Allred, parliamentary inquiry. State your inquiry. Was the chair's request to the gallery that they remain quiet so they can watch the debate? The chair did not intend to rule, did it, that the people of Texas don't have a right to observe our proceedings?
One of the critical, we're at a very critical point in our negotiations or lack of negotiations on the Middle East. And anything that solidifies positions there now would not be overly helpful. But I don't think this comes as a great surprise to the United States, nor do I think it comes as a factor that's going to make peace a great deal more difficult. Sadat has confirmed his need for support before Secretary Rogers went to the Middle East, and now this seems to be a solidification or reaffirmation of this. But I don't think it need be interpreted as something terribly new.
Number one, make them aware that this funding and retraining money is available, number one. Also, that to get them to thinking in terms of the fact that they don't need an aerospace or engineering or defense type of job to bring these unemployed into their business or industry. In other words, this could be something that's some job they may have could be completely unrelated to the aerospace industry.
I thought we had a tremendous effort, Jerry. We obviously were a little bit weakened by the previous weekend up in Montreal. But I thought all the boys really put out, and we were very unfortunate to lose the game. I think everybody who was there would agree with that. We had untold chances which just wouldn't seem to go in. And I think considering the fact we had a weakened team, and of course Rochester were last year's champions, so they're no pushover, I think we did very well considering, you know.
Beaten by circumstances, as Ron said, and the circumstances, you would have to say mostly were Montreal's rough play week before last, would you not?
Yes, indeed. The battle we had up in Montreal was just amazing, really. How we could come away without winning the game, and indeed weakened so much that we lose the next game, is just astounding. But these things happen in soccer, and I think that we're a good enough team this year. We've got enough depth in the team, as was shown against Rochester, that I feel confident we're going to be there at the end, you know, when the playoffs come up.
Are you looking forward to playing Atlanta?
I sure am. We beat them the first time, and this time we have to beat them, because if we don't, then we're in bad shape. But if we do, then we'll probably go up first place, and that's good. Yeah.
How do you feel about this Tornado team as compared to last year's?
there's no doubt about it. It's the best team we ever had. And the fact that we lost last game and we tied the game 1-3 is just, I think, coincidences working against us, that's all.
Even though you didn't get to make the Montreal trip, I'm sure you, from what happened to the club, are looking forward to Montreal's return here on July 24th, are you not?
Oh, I sure am, because in Montreal not only we lost points, but we lost a couple of players because of injuries, which they did on purpose. So I think that's a shame, and I'm looking forward to the second game here. I think we deserve to lose here.
Children's Series, The Flame of Hope Candles, created by retired children in memory of John F. Kennedy. The candles are here today to remind us that he lived and was himself a flame of hope. The 4 points at the base represent beauty, charity, understanding, and love, and of course the flame is hope. These children, as are all children, are the hope of the world. Now,
Are you aware of that court's ruling?
Mr. Reed, I'm very aware of that particular case, which is on appeal, which means it is not a final decision. Therefore, we do not know what the net result will be.
You made no attempt then to comply with the lower federal court's ruling here.
Our committee did not attempt to interpret what the Supreme Court decision might
Well,
be.
you don't have to interpret what the lower court said. They define it, Mr. Jones. Anyone who's got the intelligence to read the decision can tell what they said. Have you read the decision?
Mr. Reed, we have considered the decision. I would not debate it any further. If you have any other questions,
Well,
I would answer them.
you didn't answer my question. Have you read the decision?
I have not read the decision.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. I think you're a very competent chairman.
I appreciate that compliment.
Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Gamage?
Mr. Speaker, I move to recommit House Bill 783 to the House Committee on Congressional and Legislative Districts with the instruction that
Mr. Gamage, Mr. Jones did not yield for that type of motion.
I was asking you to yield, Mr. Speaker. You recognize me.
Mr. Jones has the floor, Mr. Gamage.
You recognize me, Mr. Speaker.
Not for a motion, Mr. Gamage.
But that the people there did not know John F. Kennedy and did not accept these little tokens eagerly. feeding on itself. For John F. Kennedy was no myth. He was a human man, an imperfect man, a fallible leader who knew well that he had promises to keep and miles to go before time closed in on him. But he brought to our country a vision of greatness, a thrill of hope that we will never quite get over, or with a Camelot nostalgia ever quite forget. The man Kennedy possessed a charism that was amazing, and in an age when men of greatness seem in such short supply, his impression on the nation and the world was phenomenal.
We found some bone and some very small, delicate, fragile fragments, and this is about it at the present time. There's no, as I said before, there's no definite indication right at this stage of the game whether we're dealing with human or non-human remains.
Jerry, Channel 5 News contacted the husband and father of the missing women, Robert Gentry Elston, today at his office here in Oklahoma City. We asked for comment on this latest development in the long-pending case. Elston said he believed the news media had done him a disservice with undue publicity prior to any positive identification of the bones at Fort Worth, and he believed no useful purpose would be served by any comment of his at this time. However, Elston indicated should the bones be positively identified as those of his missing wife and daughter, he would then, in his words, be happy to talk with the news media. It was 9 o'clock the evening of November 21st, 1963, that Mrs. Marjorie Elston and her 18-year-old daughter, Melinda, left their home at 6420 Sterling, just outside War Acres here in Oklahoma City. Police traced the women to a neighborhood grocery, then to a brief visit with friends in fashionable Nichols Hills. The women have not been seen since. However, tips from jail inmates have led officers to several search sites, the last known 2 years ago at a well near Kiefer, Oklahoma, and that's near Sapulpa. Neither the women, their car, nor the $4,000 worth of jewelry that they were wearing have ever been located. Oklahoma officials do say, however, that if the bones near Fort Worth are positively identified as those of Mrs. Elston and Melinda, they do have a suspect. This is Joe Halbert, Jr. reporting from Oklahoma City.
We've had more unity the last 3 years in the Democratic Party than any time in history. For instance, in the last election, we had a governor that ran that was unopposed in the Democratic primary. And for the first time in this century, there wasn't any statewide runoffs that were required. So I think this is ample proof the party is united.
What about the Ben Barnes, John Connolly, quote, faction, unquote, as opposed to the Preston Smith faction? Though, doesn't this seem to be widening any split more so than say, in the last 3 years?
Oh, I don't think so. You know, everybody should be allowed to have their own views, and I think they're expressing themselves with the way they feel within their own mind about the party. But I don't think it's of any major consequence. I think the party is working closely together, and I don't think we have the problems that have been brought about in the newspapers.
Senator Benson has specifically called for a different chairman to replace you. How soon do you anticipate that there would be a meeting of the full executive committee at which any of these things could be ironed out before you get into the campaign year?
Well, we haven't set any particular date when the full committee will meet. The State Democratic Party is a party that believes in involvement and participation of the committee members, and I'm speaking about the members on the SDC. We have about 12 different committees, and all of them will function in certain areas, and they'll come up with programs that fit into that particular area. And whenever it's necessary, well, the full committee will meet.
Before, say, fall?
I couldn't determine this time because we're going to have to wait until these committees get their programs going, and then when it's necessary, well, they will meet.
The House of Representatives got off to a rather slow start today, as many members were still licking wounds from the bitter fight they had here yesterday and last night over House redistricting. The plan that was finally approved was attributed directly to House Speaker Gus Mutcher. Dallas and Tarrant County representatives will run at large, 18 in Dallas, 11 in Tarrant, each county receiving 3 new members because of an increase in population. Dallas and Tarrant County representatives generally supported the Mutcher plan. Only Dick Reed and Fred Agnich were among the bitter foes in the battle yesterday. Final passage of this bill came only after 10.5 hours of heated debate in which the opponents tried desperation parliamentary tactics and had an almost endless number of amendments proposed for debate. Those who fought against this bill, however, say that it may never take effect. Representative Rex Braun of Houston explains.
There's many of us that feel that we are ready to go to court if this bill does become law in this session.
What's wrong with it?
Well, of course, it's almost a joke when you see, even in an area like Dallas, still running at large after many court rulings. Harris County, I have to represent a district that's a gooseneck district. A judge will probably laugh this district out of the courts. It's almost impossible to be representative of a group of people when you represent people on one side in the working class and people on the other side in management.
I think you're being naive beyond belief if you believe that Vice President Agnew made his Des Moines speech or any of the further speeches without the knowledge of the administration. And now it's been proven, as we suspected all along. Administration top spokesman like Herb Klein, and even the president himself has said that you local guys are great, but those networks are really bad.
Are you genuinely afraid of excessive government regulation? Do you see this actually coming out of this session of Congress, or do you feel that most of this is talk?
Well, I think it's talk at this particular stage, and I think that if the members of the press, and I mean newspapers as well as electronic media, don't stand firmly on their rights under the First Amendment, that yes, I think we might very well have legislation that would change our accepted mode of life.
What kind of legislation is now being considered?
Well, as you know, the so-called Truth in Broadcasting bill that has come up in Congress, which would demand that we keep all of our tapes, all of our film, in perpetuity. Can you imagine what would happen in your film vaults if you had to keep every single piece of film that you ever shot, or every audio tape? I don't think anyone, there would be no place to put it. And who's going to look at it, and who's going to determine? In other words, they're going to have a nationwide censorship. That's what it amounts to.